The bills were damp from the humidity of the grocery store cooler. Emma flattened them against the glass counter, one by one. Her fingers moved with a rhythmic, desperate precision. Across the wood, the clerk did not look up, his thumb flicking through the stack with a sound like dry leaves. She had worked 12 double shifts for this total. Every hour of standing on concrete floors had narrowed down to this pile of crumpled paper. She pushed the final coin into his palm. He slid the heavy, scratched camera across the surface. It hit the wood with a dull, hollow thud. Emma gripped the body of the device. The metal was cold, biting into her skin, but she did not loosen her hold. She turned and stepped out the door. The gray afternoon air hit her face, sharp and biting. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the weight of the camera pulling at her hand, feeling the immense gap between her current exhaustion and the future she was trying to buy with this single, battered object. Emma raised the camera. The lens focused on a single, rusted street lamp, its yellow light flickering against the encroaching dusk. She pressed the shutter. The mechanical click was sharp, violent, and far louder than she expected in the hollow silence of the street. It echoed off the brick buildings and vanished. That night, she sat on the floor of her apartment, the glow of the monitor washing out the room. She uploaded the image. A progress bar crawled across the screen, then vanished. 0 views. She refreshed the page. The screen remained static. The numbers did not budge. She leaned back, the hard floor pressing into her spine, and looked at the camera sitting on the rug. It felt heavier than it had in the store. She tapped the refresh icon again. A rhythmic, nervous habit. Nothing changed. The digital void offered no validation, no signal that anyone had seen her work. She turned the monitor off, and the room plunged into a darkness that felt thicker, more absolute than before. She sat in the quiet, listening to the hum of the hard drive, waiting for a notification that refused to arrive. The next day, she went back out. She aimed at the same street corner, but at a different angle. Click. Then again. She repeated this until the memory card hummed with data. Each evening, she returned to the floor, eyes fixed on the screen, fingers moving across the keyboard to sharpen contrast and adjust levels. The cycle became her primary reality. Weeks bled into months. The light outside her window shifted from the pale gray of late winter to the harsh, humid glare of summer, but the screen remained unchanged. 0 views. She kept the camera on her desk like a ritual object, its presence a constant reminder of the gap between effort and result. She learned the software by trial and error, her eyes burning under the blue light of the monitor long after the city went quiet. Her knuckles grew stiff from the hours of editing. She watched the upload bars finish, night after night, only to stare at the same empty metrics. There was no feedback, no response, just the steady, relentless ticking of the clock. She did not stop. She simply cleared the files, formatted the card, and prepared the lens for the morning light. The bills were stacked in a jagged tower on her laminate desk, red ink marking the final notices. Emma pushed them aside to make space for her laptop. Her phone buzzed, the screen lighting up the cramped room. A notification from a friend popped up. A photo of a new house, a set of keys held up against a suburban sky. Another alert pinged a promotion announcement, a corporate profile picture with a polished, confident smile. Emma stared at the glowing rectangle in her palm. The contrast was a physical weight in her chest. She looked down at her own floor, cluttered with lens caps and tangled charging cables. Her friends were buying, building, and advancing, their lives moving in a straight, upward trajectory. She was still counting coins to pay for the electricity that powered her failing website. She put the phone face down. The silence of the apartment felt louder than before, punctuated only by the distant sound of traffic outside. She looked at her camera, gripped the cold metal casing, and forced herself to open the editing software again. The gap between her current reality and the version of her life she chased was wide, jagged, and terrifying. She chose to ignore the notifications and kept her focus on the pixels. The interface became her world. She stopped looking at the clock and started watching waveforms and histograms. When a color grading attempt resulted in a muddy, pixelated mess, she did not walk away. She pulled up tutorials, scrubbed through hours of footage, and adjusted the curves until the image snapped into sharp, cinematic clarity. Her eyes ached, dry and burning under the relentless white glare of the monitor. She learned to read light, to manipulate shadows, to carve stories out of static frames. One night, the software froze during a critical render. The progress bar stuck at 99%. She hit the desk, forced a hard restart, and watched as the files reloaded. She did not panic. She simply began again, realigning every frame with practiced, precise movements. Her hands moved faster now, keyboard shortcuts becoming muscle memory. She was no longer guessing, she was building. The raw, shaky footage she captured in the morning transformed under her hands into something deliberate, textured, and deep. She saw the change in the monitor. The amateur blur was gone, replaced by a visual language she had painstakingly constructed. Night by excruciating night. The final notice for the rent arrived in the morning mail. Emma laid it on the floor, the paper curled at the edges. She had $40 left. The math did not work. She looked at her camera, the metal surface worn smooth from constant handling. Her bank account balance was a flat, unforgiving zero. The temptation to list the camera online, to trade her only tool for a month of breathing room, pulsed in her mind. She picked it up, feeling the familiar weight, the lens clicking slightly as she turned the focus ring. She walked to the pawn shop door, her hand hovering over the handle, then stopped. The air in the hallway was cold, smelling of stale coffee and damp concrete. She pulled her hand back. She could not sell it. She turned around, walked back into her apartment, and set the camera on the table. She grabbed her coat, checked the battery indicator, and stepped out into the street. The light was fading, the sky a bruising shade of purple. She did not know if anyone would ever look at what she made. She did not know how the rent would be paid. She simply raised the lens, framed the shifting shadows against a brick wall, and pressed the shutter. The notification light on her monitor blinked, a steady, rhythmic pulse in the dark room. Emma reached for the mouse, her movements slow, mechanical from hours of editing. She clicked the browser tab. A new email sat at the top of the queue. She opened it, expecting another automated rejection notice or a spam advertisement. Her eyes scanned the first line, then the second. She stopped. She leaned back, her chair creaking in the silence, and read the text again. It was a formal request for a paid collaboration. The offer was specific, naming the project she had spent months refining in the dark. She did not move. She did not shout. She sat perfectly still, the blue light of the screen reflecting in her eyes. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she did not type. The reality of the message settled into her chest, heavy and absolute. She looked around the room, at the stacks of unpaid bills still piled on the floor, then back at the screen. The validation was not a sudden explosion of joy, but a quiet, crushing wave of relief. She stared at the cursor, blinking at the end of the offer, and for the first time in years, the tension in her hands finally uncoiled. She clicked accept. That single keystroke shattered the silence of her apartment. The work shifted. One project became 3, then 10, then a relentless stream of deadlines that demanded her full attention. She moved from the cramped corner of her bedroom to a desk that spanned the length of her office. The stacks of unpaid bills vanished, replaced by contracts, invoices, and blueprints for global workshops. She was no longer just shooting. She was teaching, building, and scaling. She spent weeks on planes, crossing time zones to stand before rooms filled with students in Tokyo, London, and New York. Her digital courses went live, reaching thousands of screens simultaneously while she slept. The quiet, solitary nights of editing turned into mornings of managing teams and overseeing large-scale productions. She watched the data fluctuate on her monitors, a digital map of her reach expanding across continents. She was constantly moving, constantly refining the systems that fueled the growth, and constantly pushing the boundaries of what she had built. The empire was not a destination. It was a machine she had constructed with her own hands, piece by piece, until it possessed a momentum of its own that carried her forward across the globe. The hall was vast, filled with the low hum of hundreds of people waiting. Emma walked to the center of the stage, the floor lights, bright and unforgiving against the dark backdrop. She adjusted the microphone, her movements deliberate, calm. A hand went up in the front row. A student stood, holding a notepad, and asked, "What was the exact moment you knew you had won?" The question hung in the air, echoing against the high ceiling. Emma did not answer immediately. She reached into her bag and pulled out the old, scratched camera. The metal was dull, the grip worn smooth from years of friction. She walked to the podium and placed it down. The lens caught the glare of the stage lights, reflecting the entire audience back at them. It looked small, almost out of place amidst the professional equipment surrounding her. She placed her hand on the cold casing, feeling the familiar weight of the shutter button beneath her thumb. The silence in the room deepened, shifting from anticipation to something heavier, more attentive. She looked out at the sea of faces, then back at the battered device that had started it all. The gap between the girl on the floor and the woman at the podium vanished. "I never knew," she said. The voice did not waver. It traveled clearly to the back of the hall. She stepped away from the microphone, the feedback whine dying out instantly. She did not look back at the audience. She did not reach for the camera again. It remained on the podium, a relic under the harsh glare of the stage lights. She turned and walked toward the dark wings of the stage. Each footfall was steady, rhythmic, and final. The auditorium held a breath, the silence stretching, thick and absolute. No applause broke the tension yet. People sat still, eyes fixed on the small, battered device left behind. Emma disappeared into the shadows, leaving the weight of her journey resting on the wood of the podium. She had nothing else to carry. The camera sat motionless, reflecting the vast, quiet space. She walked out the exit door, the heavy metal latch clicking shut behind her. The sound was small, but in the stillness of the room, it was definitive. The work was done. The cycle was closed. She kept walking, leaving the room to its own reflection and the camera to its own history. The stage remained empty, save for the object that had seen every step of the way.